we'll be back in just 2 minutes to look at sports with Don Chevrier.
When you tackle a difficult problem, and landing a man on the moon is very easy as a total problem of technological and human considerations as compared, let's say, with the design of a new city.
Most people would applaud the man on the moon, but they said, hell, what a waste. This dugout is it's been with these people for literally hundreds of years. These are things that they have. It has developed their respect for the sea, the respect for wood, the respect for a certain way of life.
Man can reach the planets, but can he plan his own? This is the Age of Aquaria.
Watch it on Thursday night at 10. Sports highlights follow on weekday in a moment. Many people think that our North American emphasis on sex has been at the expense of tenderness and love. Tonight at 10:30, Man at the Center examines the emotions which accompany, or ought to accompany, desire. Join Donald Crowdis and his distinguished group of experts for All You Need Is Love, tonight at 10:30 on Man at the Center. A young vice president cops out of his father's multi-corporation business world to chase the wind, tomorrow night at 10. Weekday, and your host, George Finstad, will be back after this message. The gift of a potted plant from a beautiful woman starts McQueen off on one of his most bizarre adventures tonight at 9. The woman begs McQueen's help in her quest to get a passport from Ottawa. Join Ted Follows and Don Greenhall tonight at 9 on McQueen. The talk turns to comedy tomorrow night at 10:30 when Irish Coffee chats with comedians, writers, and actresses.
Weekday sports with Don Chevrier. And Don, there's word that we're developing another Canadian World Cup winner, perhaps. How long is it going to take?
Not as long as many people thought after Nancy Green's retirement. Nancy, in fact, thinks this new girl is better at her age than Nancy was at 16. The girl, of course, is Betsy Clifford of Ottawa, George. She was second today in the World Cup slalom race in Bad Gastein in Austria. She's 16 years old, as we said, and was about a second and a half behind the winner, Ingrid Laforgue of France. Betsy raised her points total to 58 now in the World Cup race. She is now in 5th place in the race for that cup. Michelle Jacot of the French team is the World Cup leader. She fell during the second run today, but she still holds the lead of the total of 121 World Cup points. The downhill race is scheduled tomorrow. Looks as though Miss Clifford is progressing right on schedule, if not ahead of schedule, for next month's World Championship in Italy. The Montreal Canadiens are having a good deal of trouble convincing some of their veterans to report to the minor leagues. First, Gump Worsley refused to be demoted to the Montreal Voyageurs of the American Hockey League, and Gump is still cooling his heels on the sidelines in Montreal. Now we're told that Dick Duff did not report for practice at the Montreal Forum yesterday. He showed up this morning but was told not to work out, but instead to see General Manager Sam Pollock tomorrow morning. The story is that Dick Duff may be suspended for not accepting reassignment to the American Hockey League team. Also in Montreal, the Canadiens coach Claude Ruel has chosen 2 Leaf players to join the Eastern Division team for the All-Star game a week from tonight in St. Louis. Ron Ellis and Dave Keon were chosen today, along with Bobby Hull of the Blackhawks, Jean Rattel and Rod Gilbert of the Rangers, Carl Brewer and Frank Mahovlich of Detroit. Tonight's only NHL game has Philadelphia playing in Oakland. Tomorrow, the Leafs are at home to the league-leading New York Rangers in one of 4 midweek games. Charlie Burns has been confirmed as the coach of the Minnesota North Stars for the balance of this season. Burns took over on an interim basis from Ren Blair on December the 29th. Eddie Joyle's been lost to the L.A. Kings for a period of from 3 to 4 weeks. He's the Kings' top goal scorer. He has a cracked bone in his right heel. He was hurt in the game with Minnesota last weekend. The Kansas City Chiefs arrived home from the Super Bowl in New Orleans yesterday, and they were met by a welcoming committee of more than 100,000 of their loyal fans.
100,000 fans jammed the 30-block parade route to pay tribute to their heroes. Wide receivers Frank Fitz and Otis Taylor braved the cold to ride in the open, while others remained in closed sedans. The scene was in contrast to that in Minneapolis, where only 350 persons turned out to welcome home the beaten Vikings. Schools and businesses in Kansas City had been closed so that everyone could take part. Another 10,000 fans packed their way into Liberty Memorial Mall, where the mayor and city officials gathered to honor the Super Bowl champions and owner Lamar Hunt. Many of these players were on the Kansas City team that lost to Green Bay in the first Super Bowl 4 years ago. Dawson said they'd lived with that loss until the 23-7 win Sunday and the victory celebration on Monday.
Quarterback Len Dawson was barely home when the call came to fly to New York City. Sport Magazine wanted to present Dawson with the keys to a 1970 sports car. He was chosen the outstanding player of Sunday's game. For Dawson, it capped the biggest week of his football career, one dampened for a while by rumors concerning calls to him by a Detroit gambler.
Len Dawson, congratulations on your performance and your team's victory in the Super Bowl.
Well, thank you very much. It was gratifying. It was the goal we set, and we attained it, and we really can't ask for more.
Well, last week must have been a nerve-shattering experience for you after the gambling story broke.
Well, there's no doubt about it. It caught me by surprise, and it affected not only me, I think it affected a lot of our teammates, but I think in the long run it had a good effect on us because it pulled us closer together in that ball game, and we went out with more determination when we played it.
Len, the
U.S. Pro Football Commissioner Pete Rozelle claims that the telecast of Sunday's Vikings-Chiefs game attracted more viewers than man's arrival on the moon last July. Rozelle said the game had the biggest audience of any day or primetime TV show this year. That includes the wedding of Tiny Tim. The Montreal Expos have been invited to play in Big League Baseball's Hall of Fame game at Doubleday Field in Cooperstown, New York this year. Their opponents will be the Chicago White Sox. The date is July the 27th. And now, here's a sports view from Ken McKee of the Star.
Well, Don, I'm getting to the point where I really feel the Russians are a little bit afraid to play North American professionals in hockey. A few weeks back, we had the case of Russia asking the International Olympic Committee whether playing against pros would contaminate their amateurs for purposes of the Olympics. Now, you don't have to be any genius to know what Avery Brundage's answer would be to something like that. We all know what happened. Brundage spoke. The Russians spread the word. Several other nations panicked. The pros were out, and so are we. That's where it stands, at least until today. Now I read where the Russian coach Anatoly Tarasov is adding more fuel to the fire, which doubtless he hopes will assist Russia even more in retaining forever and a day her stranglehold on the World Hockey Championship, or at least that version of it for which the phony amateurs play. Anatoly, writing in the newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda, says he feels international hockey is getting too much like the professional game, a fact which naturally he laments. Tarasov decries the developing of loopholes in the rules, which he says permit more and more to introduce the rules of Canadian professional hockey. For shame, he says. He claims that officials at recent world tournaments have expanded the rules, permitting such deplorable acts of aggression as blocking the man carrying the puck, even bumping him into the boards, pushing, and other acts detrimental to the good of hockey as it was originally intended to be played. Originally, that is, by Anatoly Tarasov and the Russians. Now, I'll be the last man in the world to uphold dirty hockey or some of the stick-swinging bloodbaths we've had, but it seems it can happen elsewhere, right under Anatoly's nose. My colleague Jim Proudfoot watched a junior game in Geneva a couple of weeks ago when he was over attending the meetings from which we withdrew from World Hockey, and he found it to be as violent a game as he'd seen in a long time. And I haven't seen the Russians backing down from any of the rough stuff when they play exhibitions over here. So when Tarasov calls for a limitation to the erosion of the rules and demands that the referees in games be instructed to demand that strict adherence to the rules be observed, I suspect an ulterior motive. I suspect Comrade Anatoly has been reading the papers, how Leonard Svedberg of Sweden, a good defenseman for that country, laughed at suggestions that Canadian professionals were any more pro than Anatoly's men, how several European associations, admittedly a little late, have supported Canada's stand. It's obvious to Anatoly, I suspect, that Canada will be invited back, maybe sooner than most people suspect, though not this year. And when it happens, the wily old Russian wants to make sure we're playing the game his way so he can still win.
Well, that message became very clear right from the start, and I think the more time that passes, Ken, it's more obvious that Canada did the right thing when they pulled out of World Hockey and left the Europeans with their own 5-team or 6-team house league. It's 6 now that Poland's in. The Canada Life Bonspiel this evening resumes. Of course, for all the rinks now, it's win or else. They play right down sudden death elimination until the finals on Saturday night at the Royals. And that's our sports story. So long for now.
We'll have a final word on weekday after this.
Everybody is pushing me the way they want to go.
This sort of deal has got to be brought out into the open.
Come on, then. Let's go.
The door! Never mind the door.
You coming down the well hole tonight?
Come on, Uncle Wayne.
Effective, Red. You make us effective.
Reddick returns to CBC television starring Donald Harron in the title role, Don Borisenko as Gower, and Gary McKeon as Mark.
What do you want? Answers. Leave what?
God's only son.
It can be stated that way.
By you.
No.
Not by you. Not God's son.
We're all God's sons.
That's not what it says.
Ladies, gentlemen, please. Because I'm a professional like you. I can't resign on that basis. Fired, yes, but resign, no, sir.
Watch Reddick tomorrow night at 8:30 on CBC television. We'll return with Weekday in a moment.
The Bold Ones, a contemporary series about today's new professionals. E.G. Marshall, David Hartman, and John Saxon as Dr. Theodore Stewart, the Doctors, pioneers in medicine's provocative new world.
Don't try, do, including your knowledge of new developments, new techniques.
Burl Ives, Joseph Campanella, James Parentino as Neil Darrell. The Lawyers, two generations confronting today's explosive courtroom challenges.
Now, I'll resign from the bar before I let them execute a man I know is innocent.
A lawyer has to do everything for his client except leave the profession.
Leslie Nielsen, Harry Rhodes, committed to enforcing the law, dedicated to building a better city.
You got something against self-improvement?
But it's a cop on the beat that gets his head knocked in when they don't materialize. This is riot time, Washburn.
The Bold Ones deal with the emotional problems of three women with varying degrees of cancer tonight at 9:30.
I was very much amused, Don Chevrier, by your reference to the fact that the Super Bowl outdrew Tiny Tim's wedding. That's significant. I think somehow it's healthy.
Well, I would hope it would outdraw Tiny Tim's wedding. I'm surprised. I think probably we all are. It would outdraw a man's first steps on the moon. I think it's a little out of perspective there. Do you recall, Ken, last year when they interrupted a National Football League game for a transmission from outer space, and the fans, I think it was NBC, and they almost blew the switchboard lines out in protest?
Well, I think this is really nothing unusual, Don. The American public, and I guess we're part of it, have some pretty strange sense of values. People would stay up to watch Tiny Tim's wedding on The Tonight Show, but they wouldn't stay up to watch the man landing on the moon. Although, quite honestly, I find that figure hard to believe, that more people did watch the Super Bowl than the moon landing.
Well, Pete Rozelle doesn't quote the figures, but he says the largest audience, including these two shows.
The only difference could be that the landing on the moon was at 11 o'clock at night. It was supposed to be at 1:30 in the morning. Tiny Tim's wedding was around midnight, and this was at 3 o'clock on a Sunday afternoon.
And
that
the
could be
football
a
game,
factor.
it all went on schedule except for the Minnesota Vikings, of course. That halftime show, though, disturbed me, George. I know you saw it on Sunday afternoon. I thought that really the reenactment of the Battle of New Orleans had little to do with a pro football game and certainly couldn't be classed as entertainment, with the smoke billowing up over the field and the photographers bending over the mock fallen, taking shots of them.
Jake Goddard was down there.
Yes.
Do you think maybe he got any ideas from that for the Grey Cup game, Don?
Well, Jake went down for two reasons: to talk to Pete Rozelle, the U.S. Commissioner, about an agreement whereby we won't sign your college players, and you be sure not to lure our pros down south, and that may evolve. But he also wanted ideas to run the halftime Grey Cup show. I think he's satisfied now. He's got a dandy all by himself up here.
He's doing pretty well the way he's going. Any quick speculation about the outcome of those talks between Goddard and Rozelle?
I think they'll reach agreement, beneficial to both sides, certainly the CFL.
Okay, great. And that's it for Weekday for tonight. We're back tomorrow at the same time. Good night.